Hi, this is Michael Pink, Milwaukee Ballet Artistic Director here at 88.9.
So we are sitting in the 88.9 studio. Next to us is a concert happening right now. There's an audience watching a stage with a guitarist on it, and we're going to do our best to just focus in on ourselves.
I promise not to sing along.
Well, Michael, thank you very much for being a guest. You are a formidable artist, an incredibly accomplished person, and I actually think for the specific theme that we're exploring on this episode, which is kind of Milwaukee as a mosaic, as a cosmopolitan city, ? Is it cosmopolitan? With your particular background and set of experiences you've had in your life, you're a really good person to explore that idea with.
Thank you.
So if we could just start, can you share a little bit about your background growing up? Obviously, we could make a mini-series about you, but give us a little sense of where you come from.
Sure, yeah. Obviously, I'm from England. I was born in a working-class background in the north of England, very much. Anybody who's familiar with Billy Elliot, that's kind of the story. That's the period, and that's the struggles of living in a sort of working-class environment where there is a distinct lack of understanding and education around the arts. So that's key to an awful lot of the work that I do here now, is making sure that people who have no knowledge of arts or a misconception of arts, and not just the ballet, are exposed to a few more of the realities of it and to see if it connects with them. So growing up, I always wanted to be in theatre. I never wanted to be a ballet dancer, but it was something that my mother said, give it a go, learn. As with all young people, it was just gathering information. And so I ended up going to the Royal Ballet School. I always maintained largely because it was in the 60s, and that a guy who wanted to be a dancer was such a rare occurrence, and I had pretty good feet and legs, which means nothing to people who don't understand dance, but it's an aesthetic quality that people look for. And so I got a place at the Royal Ballet School, and I trained there, and then I got offered some jobs, and from that day to this, I've never been out of work. But I've always wanted to go back into music theatre and filmmaking and doing all these other things that have always inspired and intrigued me. And so I think that reflects a lot in the kind of work that I do, which is very cinematic, even though it's live theatre. It's very thematic, dramatic work. So I guess I'm sort of constantly bringing together my life's experiences. And my focus is more on the people and the good and the care of good artists and the understanding. So there's a lot of pastoral care. There's an awful lot of sort of pseudo-psychology involved with this. And not even pseudo, actually. There's a lot of time when one feels you're being a father, a parent. I'm a father of 3 wonderful children, but I feel like all of the people I work with as artists are, in fact, an extension of my family. And that leads to my feeling that this community is one very, very large family. In the arts, certainly in the arts and beyond, there is a real sense of shared common values and shared common aims.
For sure. Do you see Milwaukee, where we're sitting, in York, where you're from, as being cities that are sort of akin to each other? You mentioned the blue-collar roots of where you're from, and Milwaukee clearly is a place that has a very rich industrial manufacturing past, and I think is still a very present part of its identity.
I think there are absolutely a lot of similarities between York in England and Milwaukee here. I think one of the really important things for me in coming to this city, which was December of 2002, there had been MPT television had produced Making Milwaukee.
The John Gerda series.
The John Gerda. Yeah. What was it called? Yeah. And it just come out, and I thought, oh, this is good. I can watch this. I had it on DVD, and I thought this will be a great introduction to me and my family as to this place that could be our new home. We had no idea for how long it was going to be our new home. And the Making of Milwaukee, it really immediately gave myself and my wife a great sense of what this city was, and what resonated more than the city I come from in York is the depth the immigrant population and how this city grew up around its industries, and how Cudahy and all of the little villages grew around an industry and people investing in them. And it was such a powerful story because it felt very European to me, the Germanic architecture of this city. There were so many things about this city that I felt were very, very sympathetic to Europe. It didn't feel like an American city, and I've worked and visited many of them. The lake is an absolute gift in terms of just its inspiration and its sense of infinity. But the actual community and the people and the sense of all of these, since the mid sort of early 1800s, people emigrating here to work, and then you go out and you find about the Scandinavian people who came here with the promise of farming land, and the land was filled with old tree stumps, and so they couldn't farm it, and they died. So there's this kind of rich history of this city, which I don't think, other than on the East Coast, you get that much of a sense of history about it. So I really felt very, it would be wrong to say at home, but it made me feel very confident again that this was a place that had roots. It had some serious integrity. It was clearly the kind of community that legacy families who had invested their money through their industry, through their profit, into the city, and had made it a place that they were going to look after. It reminded me painfully about England, that it's slow, and that things take an awful lot of time, and you have to keep working at it. And there's less of that kind of "woof, can do, let's do it now" mentality. But let's think about it. Let's be thoughtful. But I felt, as with Europe and England in particular, once a commitment had been made, whether that was through a friendship or a commitment to you and your organization of support, it was genuine, and it was for life, unless you were doing something, to turn people away from it. So I think there were the values that I really felt, okay, I'm an Englishman, I can be patient. I can just sit and wait. That's what I do. We love standing in queues. So there was a real sense of there being a European culture and a sense. Early on I went to the Serbian-Croatian church up on Oklahoma and 50th to a festival, a folk festival. There was
St. Sabas?
St. Sabas. And I went to the folk festival there with some new friends here. And we were just enthralled by how many different nationalities were represented there. Yeah, there were one or two groups coming in from out of town. Basically, by and large, these were people that lived within the metropolitan area of Milwaukee and out in the suburbs, and they really did represent a huge diversity of culture. And there they were in their national dress, playing their national music, cooking their national food, and you just go, wow.
For sure. I think, and we don't have a ton of time, so I kind of want to cut to one of the chases of, I think, the paradoxes of Milwaukee, which is, we are a city of remarkable diversity. We are a city of remarkable, deep-rooted culture. We're also a city of remarkable and deep-rooted segregation, of racial dysfunction and conflict often. And I think when we were thinking about the theme of the show of that, the idea, we were thinking about Milwaukee as a city of immigrants and migrants, and we came up with this sort of idea of, or the idea of cosmopolitanism. Like, are we cosmopolitan? And that truly is a bolded and italic question mark. Are we a cosmopolitan place? Because we're not necessarily known for our eagerness to exchange. We're not known for our, perhaps we might be known for a deficiency of curiosity in the other or those outside of our own, and like kind of a closedness. And that comes with scarcity and disparity and kind of the distortions that come with being such a divided place. So for you coming to Milwaukee, both seeing that deep-rooted European culture, but then maybe also seeing some of the reality of this bigger racial picture across the many continents who have populated Milwaukee, kind of how did that play into your adjustment to finding Milwaukee?
Well, certainly to come to a city that you find out fairly early on that the racial disparities are extreme, and that in terms of its rating as a city with segregation, it's one of the worst. That's not something that you would want to be standing on a hilltop and shouting out loud about. So looking at Why is that? What are the potential reasons behind that? How does that impact this city, which I don't think this city is a cosmopolitan city. I think it is now on the move, and it has its opportunity ahead to really begin to redefine itself. And maybe the word cosmopolitan could very much be attached to it in the very near future if it continues this growth and it keeps opening itself to building its self-confidence and to promoting itself. Again, this ability to just fade into the background, to be feeling that one is poor relation to Chicago, is too easy to avoid making the statement and the commitment. There are simple things in this city, that the high-end fashion shops that have yet to move in here. I mean, Nordstrom coming in at the Mayfair Mall, everybody got really, really excited. Suddenly we've got a named store. Well, it needs things like that need to grow, and I think there's potential as our demographic changes, and unfortunately, the demographic of people who probably have means to be able to invest in the economy and to buy and to make use of an upscale retail market. They're not the people necessarily that are going to want to deal with the racial divide and the issues that are surrounding us. I think there are, as a city, I think there's a real hunger to fix issues. Again, part of the downside of any city that has a deep root and history of it is that these things go back a long time. So it's going to be harder to necessarily find the root cause of some of these things, and we know what the surface issues are. We see those all the time because they're happening everywhere, and they're reactionary, and they're usually involving violence and all of the things that do create a difficult scenario. But deep down, there are some issues that if we can just grapple with them and we can identify them, put our arms around them. And a lot of it is cultural identity. This city is filled with amazing cultural assets. If we can put our arms around the cultural identity and make it a part of who we want this city to be, and we can clearly articulate and define what that is, because we don't do that. If we could do that, then I think we could all get behind what that message is.
For sure.
Everybody's kind of swimming in their own ponds and doing their own thing in their backyard. If we could just bring it together and celebrate it and identify it, then I think we could become amazingly cosmopolitan and a desirable place to live and work, because it's amazing.
And I am with you on that discussion of culture. Often it's almost a way that we use culture as a way of minimizing each other sometimes, or sort of kind of narrowing the band of possibility for someone else. And I think for you, as a prolific collaborator throughout your career, as I looked through your long list of accomplishments, a lot of them were done in close collaboration with others, and I'm sure involved a lot of permeability and perhaps conflict, because collaboration sometimes means that, or just openness. I guess so. That made me wonder of Milwaukee as a place that's not known for people being permeable to each other, people of exchange being the currency of the city. It's a place where we're often a little bit wrought. So your adjustment to a place that might not have a really strong collaborative culture, or at least perhaps that's different in the world of ballet and dance, but
I'm not sure it is, actually. I think there are a couple of things there. I don't think there's a degree of, firstly, I think you have to build a level of credibility as an individual, regardless of what you're doing, and it is particularly if you are given the responsibility of leading an organization. You have to build your credibility. You have to build the trust around you that what you say is what you mean, and the mission that you're pursuing is something that is thoughtful, and you've listened to all of the players, and you're trying to find the way in which you can move forward. And moving forward, well, nobody wants to move forward alone. One wants to move forward as a group. So whether it's the ballet, the opera, the symphony, or whether it's the social services, or it's education, or it's the city as a whole, if we can move as one and we can identify how to do that, and be tolerant of and sympathetic and patient with people's opinions. There will be, one always says, you can ask 10 people for their opinion and you'll get 10 opinions. The challenge as always is which of those 10 are the ones you want to pursue to the next round to be able to get where you think you need to go. And then the ultimate thing is about bringing together collaborators who are openly ready to collaborate and are not in a position where they feel they're going to direct and dictate. And those are the things that I think you can only do that through time. I've been here quite a sufficient amount of time that I've built up the credibility, shall we say, and the trust amongst fellow people that when I say let's collaborate, that's let's collaborate. I don't have the answers. Half the time I don't know what we're going to do. We're going to find it together, and that's what makes it exciting. I can make decisions, I can lead, and I can be the one that will take the responsibility for it. And my artistic sensibilities are such that I trust that they're balanced and in the best interest. That's just good leadership, I think, with a view to pushing boundaries, whether that's just in a day-to-day basis or whether it's to find a product that's going to enhance confidence in the community that, you know what, we can all work together. We just got to be able to discuss and have an open attitude towards our thought process. And there is never anything that's wrong. You can only make a choice. You can only have an opinion, make a choice, and then you stick with it. So those are the things that are key.
My head's going all over the place because I'm thinking about your life and work as an artistic director, as a choreographer, and kind of what you were just describing feels very, you were kind of describing in general terms the dynamics of groups and how to move forward, but it sounds like you're drawing a lot on your experience as a choreographer and working with a troupe of autonomous individual people and building accordance among them. I'm sure there's plenty of ego and plenty of, all those other things that comes with that. But you're not only trying to build a collaborative and relational dynamic amongst them, you're also trying to get them to create art, which probably requires them to be ultimately very vulnerable to each other.
Totally. I mean, the whole key to true creative art form, in particularly in the performing arts, is to find a safe place. A safe place for us is our studios at National Avenue. I will tell the artists, and have done for years, that when they come into this space and these four walls, there are no rights and there are no wrongs. And what I want them to try and get is to the place of confidence where they will just commit. And to be emotionally vulnerable is one of the most powerful things any of us can do, but it's also one of the most frightening things. And you will see, people will have seen over the years as they look at the artists in our company, moments of incredible emotional vulnerability where you are believing every single second of a performance. That, for me, is the true testament of a great artist and a great representation of a company that works in harmony together. And one can take those things and transplant them into other art forms, but it works so beautifully well in our live theaters. So when you go to the Rep or you go anywhere and you see a performance, if you come out and you go, oh my, I believed every second of that. That's a real testament to those artists. But you're right. It takes an artistic director to facilitate and make that safe. I'm there to catch them. I'm there to catch them when an artist breaks through the fourth wall.
Sure.
And it's happened in my company several times when an artist has gotten to an emotional point where they're out of control. They can't rein it in because they don't know how to yet. They've never been to that place. So when you watch somebody go into that kind of vulnerable area and you watch them basically tearing themselves apart, you have to be there to catch them.
Yeah.
You have to be there to gently bring them back down. And then you have to talk about what did it feel like and how are we going to create that without you destroying yourself emotionally on an ongoing basis. And it takes a long time to do that. And in the world of ballet, it's very rare because it's so sort of ephemeral, and you're spending all your time trying to do all these amazing things with your body, which require all of your brain power to say, oh, and could you act at the same time?
Yeah.
Could you be Juliet? Could you be Romeo? And they're going, oh, I'm worried about my technical steps.
Something you brought up the idea of psychology, and you also just were mentioning being open and kind of shedding predispositions around what's right and wrong. And And it's almost, this is something I see in the largest levels of dialogue in our culture right now, is that makes sense of, of being open and listening. But then how do you throw out that right and wrong dichotomy for what you're going to share. But then when you receive someone and you're bristling against something, or you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm,
Like if
I
you,
think so.
like, it's kind of hard to throw the right and wrong out altogether, in that you're building connection to your instincts and how you receive things.
I think that's where the diplomacy aspect of being
Sure.
a leader comes into play. That if you dismiss something out of hand without fully listening, then you're basically rejecting that person and their idea. Now that can obviously have a dramatic effect on that individual, and it will silence them. So you've worked really hard to get people to contribute, to be a part of the space and the moment, knowing that there are no rights and wrongs. You can contribute. We just make a choice. We make a choice at the end of the day what we're doing. So you've got to find the balance within yourself to nod, to take a breath, count to 3, and then rationalize why you feel the idea has merits or not merits, why it's applicable at this moment, why it feels that through the narrative it's not the way we want to go. And in doing that, of course, each time you do that, you learn more yourself about your process of making a choice. But you use the word. The key thing to most of this is the ability to listen. If you can really, truly listen and give yourself space to hear what's being said, you can make an informed comment back, a response. With everything, it's just a growth thing. It's a growth thing. I'm creating Beauty and the Beast now, which is an extraordinary, complex story. And I have to produce physical steps. So I always liken this to an author would be sat at home writing the words, they'd edit, re-edit, draft, somebody would read, and they'd end up with all the words on a page, and then they'd say, here, this is it. And if it's a play, this is what we're working from. I have to create those words, but they're movements. So I have to do that in the studio with the music, with the sets, with all of the restrictions and the parameters before I can start to actually direct. So the process for me in finding a way through how we're going to tell this story, what is actually happening in the scene as a narrative, not necessarily the steps off time, but what's the story? The good old directing things. You come in, you sit down, I sit here, you're here, this happens, that happens. That all takes a huge amount of time. But for me, that's the basis of everything that I do as a creative artist, is I'm rooted in trying to find a reality that lives in my story that I'm trying to create at the time.
So I'd hate to keep referencing your bio, but as I was reading it, there was something that was far more writerly than I'm used to seeing in a bio. And I'm just going to read it because I think it connects with the idea you just said. Was he retired as a classical dancer after several years of struggling with the irrational of the classical dance world and its reliance on subservience over rational. That's a pretty heavy. Then it goes on. This lack of depth and understanding would become the reason for Michael to stay in the world of dance, and his commitment to encouraging and supporting all artists who desire a greater and more fulfilling emotional reality in their work. So you're kind of offering a critique. I mean, I assume you probably wrote that, or
no, I did, and I in a nutshell, as I said at the beginning, I went into the world of ballet because my mum said it would be a great idea, and because I was a boy and had lovely feet, I got taken into the Royal Ballet School. Well, at age 11 and 12, when I went away to boarding school, you speak to any kid about their moment in time, they're either having a great time or not having a great time. So initially, I was having a lovely time. I was at a boarding school. I was doing everything. I was making new friends. I was dancing. None of it had any consequences. I wasn't thinking long term, where is this going? I was living in the moment, enjoying it. Once I'd gotten out of my training, which went on for 8 years, and I got a job, and then I got off, and I suddenly was choreographing and doing other things. I was just jack of all trades. I wasn't thinking about my direction any more than kids here when they go to college are still trying to work out what it is they're going to do. And the lucky ones are the ones that have thought, okay, I know what my vocation is, and now I'm going to focus on math, science, whatever it's going to be, the arts. And so by the time I'd gotten into dancing, and I'm in my mid-20s, I'm suddenly going, this is going nowhere. I'm not feeling anything. Every time I speak to somebody, I say, could you just tell me why I'm doing this? Because I tell you to do it.
Sure.
Does it matter? No, it doesn't matter. Just be here. Just be there.
Be
and
a shape.
I realized very early on that if you ask a person, why am I doing this? And they were never asked why we're doing it, and so on and so on and so forth. They don't have an answer. They can't give you anything that you can put your arms around. And of course, actors are notorious for just digging into the backstory, wanting to know the emotional truth, all of that. And I felt that's where my heart was. I didn't want to go on stage and just be vacuous and do things because I was told to. And so I realized that if I was going to stay in this profession, then I needed to have that. And I left. I retired, and I went back into music theater, and I was doing other things, and I thought, this is it. This is where I want to be, and I want to make movies, and I want to make life. And then I got pulled back into the ballet because of teaching, and then I realized that, I can translate this through the teaching method, and then I started teaching senior students and began to build in the questions about, how do you feel about this step? What is it making you feel? And if we were doing some work about on a particular piece, I could start to delve into the story part of it, and then I realized that you begin to unlock all of the emotions, and then in creating work that would then be staged by other companies, I realized I was having those conversations with every dancer I was working with who were going, oh my goodness, nobody had ever had those conversations. Sure, it matters that technically I'm doing wonderful things, but if I don't feel it and I don't understand what I'm saying with my body, how am I supposed to get the audience to have that emotion? So it's pretty deep, but it's the only thing that kept me in it, and it's the reason why Milwaukee Ballet is a huge success, and the work I do is because it's rooted in a reality that we create, and we make it real.
And to tie that to the idea of Milwaukee being a cosmopolitan city, because I truly love Milwaukee, and I want to get to a place where it's better realizing itself. In the fact that you were able to offer a public critique and hold accountable the field that you work in is what kept you in it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And what allowed for you to have growth and achieve a greater depth of art and culture. And I think for me as a Milwaukeean, I feel like that is one of our great weaknesses, which is a public critique like that being offered of the city of Milwaukee might make you a pariah. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, where someone to put in their bio, like if Tom Barrett had his bio something like this about Milwaukee, people would be like, you're a traitor.
Yeah, well, they might sit up and pay attention for a change.
Sure.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, nobody wants to hear any comments unless there is a backup to it and a discussion and a debate, and you move forward and you can start to grow from it. Just an out-and-out criticism means nothing. But yeah, you're right. I understood what it was that was missing for me as an artist, and I promised myself that if I stayed in this profession, that would be the only reason, because other than that, it wouldn't give me anything. And I've been extremely fortunate to have found the places where I can make that difference and do those things. But I think you're absolutely right about the city, any city. If somebody is bold enough to initially stand up and really with true integrity and honesty say what they feel about it, with a view to the fact that if the city would begin to embrace some of the comments and the constructive criticism, it could get behind where it's going. It's a disparate city. Everybody's kind of off doing their things, and it needs to be galvanized around some common core goals, which I do think comes back to its cultural identity. Everything will spur from being able to sit down and say, what do we want to be? How do we want to be? What do we want this city to look like? It cannot be all things to all men. We have to make some serious choices. These are the options we have. Which 5 are we going to pick? And which 5 are we going to get behind? And yes, there will be winners and losers at the first round, but beyond that, everybody will begin to grow together, and then there will be the trickle-down effect into the communities. And I think so much of the social issues that we face in this city can be resolved through giving support to every single community to say, your community matters. It matters to you more than anything else. Don't worry about trying to get your community to integrate downtown or over here. Just develop and feel good about your identity. And once you've grappled with that and you've really begun to articulate what it is, then you will begin to grow, and you'll be able to deal with the social issues, and maybe security and safety would be. Things will begin to evolve a little bit like having just people living out in the wild. They will survive because they have to survive. They don't have a choice to say it's not my responsibility. It's everybody's responsibility to be a part of committing to it and playing their role. And I'm sure that the city would benefit from some healthy discussions. And again, this ethnic diversity question, we're supposed to be, in my profession, people come to me and say, why don't you have any more diverse dancers? Where are the black dancers? Where are the this dancers? Where are that dancers? I said, if they turn up on my doorstep and they want a job and they're good enough to be in the company and I have a position, why would I not employ them? The point being is that there are fewer people trying to get into the profession of being a classical ballet dancer because it's rigorous, it's unforgiving, it's got all the things that turn a lot of people away. You have to make a huge commitment, but once you get into it, it's great. So it's not an easy fix. I mean, we all have to work so much harder to find a way to bridge the gaps and to be available and open-minded enough to have the conversations. But it's got to be on both sides of the aisle. You're no more entitled than I am to anything. We have to work together. It doesn't matter what our backgrounds are, what our ethnic identity is. We have to work together.
So I want to ask you two more questions, and we're getting close to the end,
Yep.
and they can be pretty quick questions. One, so you are an immigrant to the United States. Do you ever find it limiting having a British accent in Milwaukee? Because you can never kind of hide that part of you, and it's frankly not very common to run into people with British accents in Milwaukee. Do you ever feel that do you ever fake an American Midwestern accent?
I think having a British accent has been an amazing asset.
Mm-hmm.
It's certainly in my profession to be able to speak to people, to fundraise, to do radio interviews. I think it's amazing that after 16 years it's still intact. Could I fake a Wisconsin accent, an American accent? No. I'm terrible with dialect. My wife is brilliant. My son is brilliant. It's never something that I've been that good at. Every accent I try and mimic always comes out the same, and I won't say what it sounds like, but it'll make my wife laugh at this moment. So no, I think it has proven to be an asset, and there is something, again, I'm told time and time again, people tend to sit up and listen if they hear the English accent. Why? I don't know. But whilst it's there and I'm using it, it's a great asset.
For sure. And my last question is, I'm sure you have a pretty voracious appetite for culture yourself as a consumer. You're a producer, you're in the kitchen all the time, serving meals to plenty of people, and I'm sure you appreciate a very well-plated meal yourself. What are some, what satisfies those cravings for you in Milwaukee? And bonus points if you can point to examples of this kind of cosmopolitan idea that we've been discussing and circling, or mosaics really succeeding here in Milwaukee.
I think in terms of satisfying any appetite culturally, this city has an abundance of arts organizations, from the larger scale, the ballet, the opera, the rep, symphony, down to small community theaters. Each and every one of them, for me, as I've experienced them over the years, has been a gratifying experience. Even to the high school performances that I go to, I realize that there is a real balanced diet of arts in our community, and how you feed from that and when you feed from that. The greatest sadness is you'll never get to see all of it. There'll always be things that you will miss, and that your work will be missed by others. But I think there's an abundance of choice at all levels, and you can connect at whatever level, which comes back again to community identity. If your community group is presenting theater or work or street murals or whatever, you can appreciate that at that level. I could be out every night of the week seeing something and being inspired, being thoughtful, being provoked by it. And I think it's not a short answer, but really, yeah.
Well, I have kind of a corollary question. This will be the true last thing, is sometimes I find you described, and I pay pretty close attention to what's out in Milwaukee, and I agree with you, it is it's almost paralyzing how many things there are to go see. You're leaving in a second to go see something.
I'm going to go and see. I mean, actually, the one thing I did want to mention, which is the children's theatre. I mean, the first stage, when I first came here and I went into first stage, they'd just gone into their new building. It made me smile. The building made me smile. I walked in and I smiled, and I still smile to this day because of the amount of young children, the incredible diversity of our kids from all over the city and the suburbs is inspiring to see young people playing instruments, acting, singing, dancing, just coming together. It's that if anybody wants to see the future of this city and the potential of this city, you go and you sit in the Commons on a busy Saturday and you go, my goodness, and you hear the collective creative spirit that surrounds you in that building. It's inspiring. It's been wonderful for my children. It's given them the confidence to be who they are and who they will be. And every performance that I go to see of the children's theatre, you see a real abundance of talent, both now and potential talent for the future, and that's very inspiring for any city.
And I think my kind of question is, can we as a city breed an audience, a culture of patronage, of where people are curious and open and kind of seeking and open to the fringes in addition to, as you described.
A very good question, because a cosmopolitan city is filled with people who are inquisitive and want to experience and want to do things and don't just want to slot into their 9 till 5 regular mode. I don't know. Very, very difficult with this city because, again, because of the racial divide and the segregation between things on this side of the river and on the south side, on the west side, it's a challenge. We see it as a major challenge. Only through increased arts education and building up the potential for people to be able to come in, and more important than anything else, is any major cosmopolitan city lives and thrives in its arts because of tourism. If people come to your city as a tourist, they're more likely to come and experience the performances and go to the museums than people who live here. And that's the same everywhere. London, New York, San Francisco, all of those cities benefit from the tourist trade. Our theatres in London were filled, but they're always filled with tourists. And that's what it is. But that could happen. This city has enough tourist attractions to come into the city. And the people from northern Chicago and Illinois are beginning to come here and will come here more because of accessibility, quality, and price point, economic reasons.
Well, you sold me. Thank you, Michael Pink. I appreciate you. You've been an excellent guest. And we'll see you on the stage in a couple days.
Great.
Or
Thanks.
in a week or so.
I look forward to hearing everybody else's comments and listening, truly listening.
Yeah.